Welcome to Lorraine Style, where I design, draft, sew, and go. I'm Lorraine. Today, I'm going to show you how to take accurate skirt measurements. If you are drafting your own patterns or wanting to alter a commercial pattern and you're running into issues with the skirt not fitting properly, you can usually attribute that to inaccurate measurements being used to construct the skirt. You may have issues like it's too tight across the hips, you have the stress lines. If you have inseam pockets, they may bulge out from the side hips instead of laying flat along the side. May have issues with the waist being too tight or too loose, skirt sagging where it shouldn't be sagging. Different kinds of fit issues can be directly attributed to inaccurate measurements being used when that garment was constructed. I'm also just going to say that this is part 2 of a 4-part series. We covered the bodice, how to take those measurements accurately, and then we still have the sleeves and the pants to do. And the pants are a biggie, so if you miss anything, don't miss that. So today, again, concentrating on how to take accurate measurements for the skirt. Stick with me. Okay, so before we get started taking the actual measurements, we need to gather a few things. You need to be wearing a leotard bodysuit or a tight-fitting garment, nothing with thick fabric or loose, baggy clothing. It needs to be tight, skin tight preferably, so that we can get accurate measurements. You're going to need a good tape measure that is not stretched out of shape. You'll need a second pair of hands. And you'll also need a worksheet or notebook, notepad, something to record the measurements on as you're taking them. Here's the cover of my ebook, Pattern Drafting Women, How to Take Skirt Measurements. You can get that for free. There's a link down below. You just sign up for my newsletter. And so this is the inside of the ebook. You have your measurements, shows you where to take them, how to take them. And then you would write the measurement over here. If you're drafting your own patterns, you want to include the ease and you get your total, so you have that information handy when you're drafting your own patterns. We're going to start with the lower torso circumference. Now, circumference means to go around, so we're going to go around the waist, front and back. Measure that. We want to measure and mark a spot 3 inches down from the center front waist, because that's our high hip area. And we want to measure down to that 3-inch point and then measure around front and back from that point for the high hip measurement. And then we want to measure the hips, which is the widest part of the lower torso. Measure that around front and back for the torso circumference. Still on the front, we want to do waist arcs. Now, this is not circumference. We're not going around the whole body. We're just going to do a quarter section of the body. So we're going to go like from the center front to the side. Waist arc. High hip arc, we're going to measure down again, get our 3-inch mark, and we'll measure from that mark to the side hip, high hip. Then hip arc would be center front to the side. And then we have our dart placement, which is we take a quarter section, divide it in half, and at the halfway mark, we would measure over from the center front to the halfway mark, and that would be our dart placement. If you're using any kind of instruction manual, textbook, when you're drafting your patterns, it will usually tell you based on the size that you're drafting for, where to place the point for the dart placement. If not, use the technique I just told you about. Okay, so the back, we'll do the same as we did for the front. Waist arc, center back waist to side, high hip, measure 3 inches down, and go from there to the side, and then hip arc itself from the widest part of the torso to the side, and then dart placement again the same. Take that quarter section, divide by 2, put your mark there at the halfway point, and that would be your dart placement. Or you can take the shoulder length and divide that in half, and at the halfway mark from the shoulder down measure, and it'll usually fall on the dart placement line. That's also our princess seam mark, or princess seam line. Okay, this is just the torso arc giving you the side view. When we're talking about a quarter section, we just go from the bust point to the side, waist, center waist to the side. This is center front, back, and of course this is a side view. Okay, vertical side. We are going to start with the side hip depth. So we know where the hip line is. We're going to measure from the waist down to that hip line, and that's going to give us our side hip depth. Now, there's a note about that. We want to measure both the right and the left side hips, okay, because sometimes they're not symmetrical, meaning they're not even. One can be higher than the other. So when you take those measurements, if there's a variance of 1/8 inch or more, then the hips are not symmetrical, they're asymmetrical, and your pattern would have to be drafted differently, and your commercial pattern would have to be altered differently to accommodate that variance. Okay, so now we're going to do the torso vertical side measurements. Starting from the waist, we'll measure from the waist down to the knee. And then measure from the waist down to the ankle. And from the waist down to the floor. Different skirt lengths. Now you'll notice I didn't give you the calf measurement, waist to calf. You'll figure that out, or if you don't, leave a comment, I'll get back to you. I touched on the asymmetric hips when one side hip is higher or lower than the other side, right side, left side, one is higher or lower than the other. The patterns would need to be drafted to accommodate that variance, or if you're altering a commercial pattern, you would need to take that into consideration if the measurements for the left and the right hip differ by 1/8 inch. Then it's asymmetrical and not symmetrical. One is higher than the other. All right, torso vertical front. We want to measure the front hip depth. So we know where the hip is. We've established that. We want to measure down from the waist to the hip on front. And then the same thing for the back. Measure from the waist down to the back hip depth. Center back. We're working on a center back and center front lines, that imaginary line that splits the body in two. And here is a copy of the cover sheet for my ebook, Pattern Drafting Women, How to Take Skirt Measurements. So we have the measurements, column, you'd list your measurements there, add your ease, and then you'd have your total. So when you're drafting your patterns, you'd have a reference point. You don't have to look back and forth between a book or look for a scrap of paper. Everything is right there where you need it to be. Okay, so that's it for how to take accurate skirt measurements. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. The third video in the 4-part series is how to take accurate arm measurements. So if you are experiencing trouble fitting your sleeves, puckered or twisting sleeves, sleeves not hanging right, you don't want to miss this video. And also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and have a fantastic day.